Okie doke. So, I lost count of the videos now. There's going to be a lot on these mechanisms because they're super central. Okay. But the next one is the knowledge production function. So we said, look, relative investments are a function of the current state of the system, which might depend on exogenous inputs or exogenous relative prices. Okay, and more of an input or a lower price for that input means that we invest less in economizing on that input when epsilon is negative. Okay, but how does this change in investment affect the next period productivity factors? How does productivity respond to the investments in productivity? What is the knowledge production function? Okay. A popular assumption in the literature is that knowledge stocks in different sectors grow independently of each other. So for instance, we could write, and I'm going to change the formulation there very slightly. I'm going to say ALT minus ALT minus 1. So that's the new stock minus the old stock. So this is the extra knowledge when moving from period t minus 1 to t is just a function of ALT minus 1 over zeta L, so that is a zeta, times the quantity invested. Okay, so the new knowledge created, which is the difference between these two, is just a function of the investment and the initial stock of knowledge in that sector. And that's for the labor sector, the same for the resource sector, okay, so that's just an assumption. Let's just go with that and see where it takes us. Well, before we continue with the math, we'll do the metaphor. So under Isaac Newton's metaphor of researchers standing on each other's shoulders, we can think of independent stocks as follows, right? In the picture, so historical within sector research is critical to the current level of productivity in that sector. For instance, a delay of 50 years in starting research in a particular sector will put that sector 50 years behind forever. Okay. Linked to this, early researchers in a sector are indispensable for later advances. The value of within sector spillovers is very large. Okay, so how does this play out in the math? Okay, sorry, still no math. The math is coming. What does empirical work say? Well, a lot of empirical work, Traitenberg et al. From 92 and many others since, show that sector-specific research builds on prior research both within and outside the sector. Okay. How could we capture that? Okay, sorry. So I thought we were just going to do the independent stocks, but we're not. We've just stated the functions for independent stocks. Now we're going to state some alternative functions, and then we're going to see what actually happens. So how might we capture something like this? Well, instead of just this, we can go with some function of AL t minus 1 and AR t minus 1. And the other way round, perhaps, for this function of AR t minus 1 and AL t minus 1. And a possible formulation, if we take the second one, AR, AL, a possible formulation would be a CES, so that function f would be AR t minus 1 to the power of epsilon plus sigma, and now we have this weighting factor, sigma AL t minus 1 to the epsilon to the 1 over epsilon. So remember before we had a function, we had a gamma and a 1 minus gamma, and I dropped them. But sometimes we need it, something like that. So here we've got sigma So what's going on here? This is within sector knowledge. This is out of sector knowledge, general knowledge. Typically we might expect sigma to be less than 1. So all else equal, within sector knowledge is more important than out of sector knowledge. What about epsilon? Now we would generally expect epsilon should be bigger than naught, so these should be good substitutes for each other. So that basically more of either is good. Okay, and yeah, how to explain that? Basically, they should be good substitutes for each other. The extreme case will be epsilon equals 1. We just care about the sum of knowledge to build on, where the out of sector knowledge is slightly less important, sigma, or maybe a lot less important if sigma is like 1 in 100, 0.01. Then we care about the sum, but each bit of knowledge out of sector is only a 100th of the value of the within sector. But it could be also that the relative stocks make a lot of difference. So if we've got loads of knowledge within out of sector and very little in sector, then this bit of knowledge in sector might be more valuable. That would be the case if epsilon is less than 1. Okay, so that is an example of a function that would work, that is more general than the independent stocks. And a significantly simpler way would just be epsilon equals 1. Still much more general than independent stocks. Okay, so that's a kind of alternative. But what happens if we go with this, with independent stocks? Okay, maybe it's time. Yeah, I think it's time for a new video then.